Hi, my name is Carly Jones. I'll be doing a brief presentation over the first part of Chapter 17, which deals with atypical sexual variations. Okay. So this chapter talks about paraphilias. Here's the full definition, but essentially a paraphilia is something that causes sexual arousal that society may not view as being okay or normal, or even the individual may feel that it's not normal or okay. So we're going to talk about some of these. Okay, the first one is fetishism, and I think most people are probably pretty familiar with this, the use of inanimate objects to become sexually aroused. What I found interesting about this, as well as most of the other paraphilias discussed, is that they're typically done by males. So that was a little interesting to me. One of the other things is about fetishism. It often involves partialism, which is arousal by a particular body part. And so I kept thinking, okay, this really fits in with media, because in television and film, a lot of times we see things where people like feet or big butts or big breasts, things like that. All right, let's move on to the next one, transvestism. Okay, so one of the things that I really thought was interesting about this is that I think a lot of people assume transvestites are exclusively gay men. That's not true. Transvestites can be both gay and straight men. And like we discussed, it is typically males. Another interesting thing that I think is really important to remember is that being a transvestite is not the same thing as being a transsexual. Transvestites have no desire to change the sex that they were born into. It also is not always about sexual arousal for people who are into cross-dressing. So that's also interesting. Exhibitionism. So the book pointed out how some of these are perhaps less harmful and some can escalate to being more harmful. So things like having a fetish or being a transvestite are typically pretty harmless because they can be done alone. The activities can be done alone or with a consenting partner. What's interesting about exhibitionists is I think our society often views people who enjoy being nude as exhibitionists, and that is not actually a correct assessment of what an exhibitionist is. An exhibitionist would be somebody who is sexually aroused by exposing genitalia to someone that they do not know. In the book, it talked about how college students, females, were more likely to have this happen, and in those instances, it was often by somebody that they knew, a friend. This can be harmful because there are victims involved, and it can be really difficult to get past these experiences. Next is obscene telephone calling and chat scatophilia. I also thought when doing this how technology today probably makes this a lot easier to do, because it's not just sending letters or making phone calls that are obscene. It can be texting, it can be Facebook messages, emails, chat rooms, and this also is done typically by men, although this also mentioned women that do it. And this was interesting. When men make obscene telephone calls or reach out through some other media, it's typically motivated by the fact that they are aroused by talking obscenely to somebody. Women are typically motivated by anger or revenge, so when they do this, it may be that they are sexually insulting someone that they think has committed a wrong to them. Voyeurism, again, one of the more risky things, because people, a lot of times voyeurs will do risky things in order to catch a glimpse of somebody undressing or engaging in sex acts. So this can include climbing trees, or hiding in someone's closet or something where it would be likely that they would get caught, which can also heighten the arousal. Sexual masochists and sadists. So masochism is, of course, arousal from receiving pain. Sadism, arousal from inflicting pain. I found it interesting that sadists, the term actually comes from the Marquis de Sade, who wrote a lot of stories about men being aroused by women really having quite horrible things done to them. So more on the more brutal side of this. Another part of this can be hypoxiphilia, where people will try to deprive themselves of oxygen by putting a plastic bag around their head, things like that. Interestingly, masochism is the only paraphilia frequently prevalent among women. It's also interesting to note, probably important to note as well, that this, masochism and sadism is not about feeling pain outside of a sexual interaction. And it is often the extreme pain is a more rare thing, because people are often excited by the situations that they're in, and the pain is usually not very intense. Sadomasochism is pretty common among couples. This is when two people consensually agree that experiencing and inflicting a small amount of pain is gratifying. Frauturism. This is an interesting word. I had heard of this. I was not familiar with the term. So this is often difficult to catch because it occurs in crowded areas. So it's hard for the police to really catch someone because oftentimes women aren't even sure that it happens so quickly. Women may not know that they've been victims of this. Of course, there are instances like toucherism where it's non-consensual fondling. That would be a little bit easier to spot. Some other paraphilias that are less common, not as pleasant to discuss, would be zoophilia, necrophilia, klismaphilia, coprophilia, and urophilia. So zoophilia involves sexual contact with animals. There's 3 different types of necrophilia. Regular necrophilia is where a person engages in sex with a dead body. Necrophilic homicide is where someone would commit murder in order to have sex with a dead body. And then necrophilic fantasy is definitely lower on that scale, where people fantasize about it, but they would never make contact with the dead body. And people who engage in necrophilia tend to suffer from some pretty severe psychological issues. Okay. Just one of the other things that I wanted to point out before closing is, like I mentioned, most of these paraphilias are committed or engaged in by males, heterosexual males who are a little bit socially inept, struggle to maintain relationships with women. So that was interesting, something to think about. And so this is my presentation, and I hope that it was enlightening to learn about different things that people do. So thank you so much.